So I want to know about your story in the Gregorian chant.
Well, first, let me tell you that prior to the Second Vatican Council, the Spiritans, both in Europe and particularly in France and here in the United States, were known as the people who maintained the highest level of liturgy. We had our own liturgical calendar, and together with the liturgy, we had a long history of relationship with Gregorian chant, and also the developments of the liturgy that were taking place in Europe. So when I was in the seminary in Ferndale, which was our major scholasticate, we did 2 years of philosophy and 4 years of theology there, Norwalk, Connecticut. The property was called Ferndale. And we already were very much immersed in Gregorian chant. I had had some experience. I had studied music before going to the seminary. And the superiors identified me as one of the ones. They sent several of us to Manhattan College of the Sacred Heart in Rye, New York. Manhattanville was run by the Religious of the Sacred Heart, the RSCJs, at the time. These were women who were founded by Sophie Barat and Philippine Duquesne in France, and they had come to the United States in the 1800s, early 1800s. And they established themselves first in New Orleans and then moved up the river to St. Joseph, Missouri, where they founded these schools for the indigenous. But they, in the United States, most of their work had developed into schools for women. And they had, the Religious of the Sacred Heart had a school in Noroton on the Sound in Connecticut. And we as Spiritans used to have that connection with them. It was a school for the daughters of the elite, you might call it. And in fact, Rose Kennedy, the mother of John Kennedy, used to go there for her retreat. And I met her one time. We were on the property. I went to serve Mass for the Spiritans who would say the Mass is there. But these same sisters had the Manhattanville College of the Sacred Heart in Rye, New York. And during the summers, they had a music program, liturgy program there. It was run by Mother Morgan, who was a wonderful woman. And they also had Mother Sullivan, who was one of the first women scripture scholars in the United States. And they had another sister, and I can't remember her name, who was the organist. Well, they gathered religious from around the country, from various orders. And I would imagine that we were about 300 in that school during the summer in that program. They focused on liturgical music at the time. You have to understand where I'm going there. I'm sent there for 3 summers in a row in 59, 1960, and 1961, just before the council. And you have to understand that already at that time, people were beginning to discuss the possibilities of the vernacular in the liturgy. The council was called up. The Pope John the 23rd, had called for the council, and the preparation was there. And there was a lot of debate and excitement in the air about what this council would do. And there were people who were very traditionalists and didn't want to see the Latin taken from the liturgy. And we were tremendously immersed in Gregorian chant at the time. So much so that the two major teachers at the Manhattanville College of the Sacred Heart were Theodore Marier, who was an organist himself and ran St. Paul's choir school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right near Harvard University. He was a wonderful man, absolutely wonderful man. But the last year that I was there, they brought Dongajar from Solesmes to teach us Gregorian chant. And by that time, we were so used to the Liber Usualis. They also had the Liber Gradualis, but we used the Liber Usualis, which was put together by the monks of Solesmes and contained the entire liturgical year in Gregorian chant, with the readings and so forth, everything in Latin, of course. We were so used to it that we had the introits memorized. We had the Requiem Mass memorized, the Dies Irae memorized. We could do various ordinaries of the Mass, various Glorias, and Kyries, and so forth. So we were totally immersed in this. We loved it. And in fact, the third summer that I was there, when Dongajar was there, Richard Rogers came from New York, and he was just finishing The Sound of Music, which was a Broadway play, and it was about the Von Trapp family who founded this school in New England. She had been Mrs. Von Trapp had been a sister in a convent in Austria, and she left there, and at the beginning of The Sound of Music, they are singing Gregorian chant in the chapel before she decides to leave. So Richard Rogers, the composer, came there to hear the Gregorian chant, to meet Dongajar, and to meet Ted Marier, to learn more and more about the Gregorian chant that he was going to include in the film. So you can imagine that during that time, we were also doing polyphony. We did Victoria, we did Rameau, we did several French composers as well as Palestrina and Vivaldi, all this kind of music. So as we went through the program, the heat was building up in this debate about the vernacular and whether we were going to begin introducing Jalino psalms at the time. And later on, of course, Father Deiss, he came much later. But it was a moment of great tension. Were we going to hold on to it, or was it just going to be something that was going to go into the past? And subsequent to that came the Second Vatican Council with the Sacrosanctum Concilium, the first constitution promulgated by the Council in its first session, 63. And together with Inter Mirifica, which was the one on social communications. And I always found that very interesting, because the two things that they passed first, almost unanimously, was the one on the liturgy, which is the major symbol of Christianity, the Eucharist, and contains everything, therefore, that was going to be developed in the Lumen Gentium. So it was a wonderful experience. I love Gregorian chant. I think that we should retain it at appropriate times in the liturgy and not let it be forgotten. But as we know, for major participation in the liturgy today, you can't expect people to learn that. So that's as much as I can tell you.
Did you go across anything of the history during the centuries from the apparition of Gregorian chant? Do you know about that?
Yes.
I tell you why I asked this question, because I'm coming from a place in Lorraine, in France, and a big cathedral is Metz there, which is, by the way, one of the most ignored cathedral in France, because when the repertory of the cathedral has been made. It was made at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and Metz was in Germany at the time. So the Germans know a lot about Metz, and they continue to publish work and book after one after the other on Metz, because it's an amazing. For example, it's the only cathedral that has more surface of window glass than wall in the whole of anything you can compare with. We have more than 50% of. It's also one of the highest one in the choir. And what else? You have the 3 or 4, 1, 2, 3 that I know of, glass windows of Chagall there.
Oh, wow.
And the famous yellow one on the side, etc., etc. But I think in the 9th century, so it has been a high place for Gregorian chant. I remember that.
Well, Guido d'Arezzo of Arezzo in Italy was the first one to develop the scale.
Okay.
The notes. After that, you would have all different kinds of roots and interpretation in that. Solesmes was great because of the paleontology. The paleontology where they were gathering all of these manuscripts and trying to put them together. Subsequent to that then came the debate over the interpretation of how you sing Gregorian chant. Because Gregorian chant has its own free rhythm. It's coupled into couples of 2 notes and 3 notes. So when what Solesmes did was put what they call the ictus under a note. So you knew how to group the notes. So it would be 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it was back and forth. And that's what made, I think, the beauty of the way that the Gregorian chant was sung in Solesmes. You would have a different interpretation if you went to Spain. You would have a different interpretation if you went to Germany. But the Solesmes school gave us that ictus, and it gave you a beautiful rhythm so that you just floated with the notes. And also, where you would put a hold on the notes, where you put the rest on the note, and so forth for the text. So it was very, very beautiful. That's what we learned from Don Dajar.
Okay. And I have been surprised in my life to think about that culturally speaking, because being in a congregation interested to Africa, that Africans are found. They love Gregorian chant. And some say that it is because they have their own traditional culture, and their chant is based on the body respiration, the breathing. And they say in the Western culture, the only chant that is like that, based on the human breathing, is Gregorian chant. So there is a kind of cultural interpretation of normal, and that makes the African love Gregorian chant.
What impressed me when I was in Ferndale in the early years, we met Father Noppinger. Father Noppinger was one of the first evangelizers in the Diocese of Moshi in Tanzania. And one of the things that he told us was that on the feast days there, Christmas, during Holy Week and so forth, the people would come from the surrounding villages already singing the Gregorian chant. It was amazing to me, in Latin. They had it all memorized.
Same in Angola, same in...
Really?
Oh yeah. I tell you, it's That's why I spoke about Africa and not of a special or in particular country, but it's really in the Bantu blood. I mean, they recognize when they hear Gregorian, because it's based on the human breathing chant. It's something that is already there in their culture, so they embrace it.
I see. Mm-hmm. Well, I remember distinctly in around late 1990s, as provincial, I went for a visitation to Tanzania. We were in the cathedral in Dar es Salaam. And I was myself and another Spiritan with me, the only white faces in the whole place. And they were having the Sunday Mass, and the bishop was at the Sunday Mass. The entire congregation sang the Gloria in Gregorian chant and the Kyrie. I couldn't get over it. Entire congregation with one major voice going up. So I guess it reinforces the point you were trying to make. Yeah. Good.
Okay, so what do you wish the people who will be with me in May and beginning of June 2023 will be in Solesmes around the 20th of May, I think.
I don't know what's going on in Solesmes right now.
Maybe the 27th.
I would presume that they still do the Gregorian chant in Solesmes.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know whether it's possible that before you go, Anne Labulski can gather the people together.
But Anne Labulski know them. She personally know the people there.
In Solesmes.
In Solesmes, and we are received by them because she knows them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's what. Well, I would say this. I don't know who the people in your group are going to be, but if Anne Labulski could get them together to teach them one or two things in Gregorian chant, it would be beautiful. I mean, do something simple like a Sanctus, or a Gloria, the simple Gloria. I think that would be great for them to have that experience before going to Solesmes and then hearing the music. Yeah. And entering into the prayer. Entering into the prayer is the most important thing. Good.
What places in the United States are known for Gregorian chant? And
today, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that in some places they're trying to impose Gregorian chant on the people. Younger priests come out with this enthusiasm about Gregorian chant. I don't think it's something to be imposed. I think that it's something to be appreciated and incorporated into the whole liturgical life of a parish. It would be beautiful to do that. It has its appropriate place, but not to impose it, but because you champion the Tridentine Mass in Latin as a flagship for the fact that you don't accept the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah. And for people who accept Vatican II Council and who are at ease with, but who are so impressed when they enter not a traditionalistic monastery where they practice Gregorian chant. I know it's for me, it has always been something that is heart-lifting, and
it is.
It's like an entry into something of the calmness and tenderness of the art of God.
The one thing that we must give primary attention to with regard to the liturgy is celebrating the liturgy in a way that it leads people into the mystery. That can be done with many types of music and so forth. But the primacy of understanding that we are entering into the mystery of the Paschal mystery of Christ before the Father you can't do that with jingle jangle kind of music. It has to be the kind of music. And Gregorian chant, when it is done well, in the context of a liturgy, which is not kind of a rigid going back, but something which is present, I think does that. I really think it does
Yeah,
that.
it speaks. I think if I had to speak about Gregorian chant, I will continue this metaphor. I don't know. There's something of that is touching the human soul from this capacity of breathing that we have received. So there is something going on that level that is speaking of the seriousness of life, the life we know as breathing persons, but it speaks also of the afterlife. And
Yeah.
that is what touches people in Gregorian chant.
I think the breathing thing is very, very important. I think you really have touched on something there. 2 points of view. First of all, that it is the breath of the Spirit. And secondly, it is related even to the prayer of the pilgrim prayer, the Hesychist movement, the breathing movement. Lord Jesus, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. With a repetition of that in the Eastern kind of spirituality. I think you're right. So good.
Okay,
Thank you.
we call it a day. Thank you very much. Have a good trip.
You too.
And